What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and we are back with the Resurrection of Magneto, and this story is amazing. So for those of you guys who need to get caught up, there'll be a playlist at the end of this video. You're like 2 videos behind. It's not a great big huge deal. The long and short of this is that Storm is trying to bring Magneto back from the dead, and he is in, by all standards of measurement, what you and I would call purgatory. Not quite dead, he's not quite alive, he's basically figuring out which direction he's going to go in. But over the course of this journey, they've had to kind of confront their own demons. The past mistakes of Magneto, the person that he was, that'll really become prominent here. But Storm's going through the same trial, and that's why, as this story picks up, Storm is met by the face of Annihilation. Now, for those of you guys who are not familiar with who Annihilation is, she was a really cool character, and she was introduced during Jonathan Hickman's run on the X-Men, but she was very ambiguous. But we're actually going to get some answers about the nature of her character. All we knew about Annihilation was that she was a kind of entity, goddess, right? A force of nature, if you want to call it that. Her essence was confined in the golden mask that you see here, and those individuals who donned her mask were usually corrupted by her presence and her power, and ultimately did her bidding. She ended up initiating something called the Genesis War, which basically saw Storm and what few mutants were left on Mars going to war against all her forces. They somehow won by the skin of their teeth. But it was a really, really cool story. The important takeaway from all this is we knew nothing about her, right? And so that's why as they talk, she says, Storm, did you really believe that we were done? And the response of Storm is, yes, right? I really believed that we were finished here. Now she does ask, where is Max, right? Where's Magneto? And it's like, well, I sent him far away. But notice the conversation between them, right? When she says, I ended you when I ended the Genesis War, the response of Annihilation is, you melted some gold, destroyed a shape I'd taken, cut me off from the physical space. To end me is more difficult. And so Storm's response, she immediately picks up on what's going on here, which is a testament to how capable Storm is, but also the fact that she's done this dance before with this particular person. And what she says is, so you say, when we arrived, another spoke to me, an essence of evil the X-Men know well, a being who has possessed many poor souls to ruin many lives, who may wear your golden face now. We knew him as the Shadow King. Now the response of Annihilation is, so Annihilation was truly a mask, or the Shadow King is the face of Annihilation. Perhaps you're thinking too small, Wind Rider. Now, here's the important thing to understand, right? He responds and he says, perhaps we are legion, each with our own name and role, yet each aligned. Perhaps you've battled us many times in many borrowed guises. Perhaps you battle us every day of your life and on into the future in endless war. And so I ask again, Aurora, are we done? And that's why Storm says, no, we're never done. So something to understand about the Shadow King in Marvel Comics, and his nature is very ambiguous to a lot of people who are even familiar with Marvel, and he's ridiculously obscure to those who are not. The Shadow King is basically the very nature of what it means to be evil. In Marvel Comics, the idea of evil is really kind of a cloak and dagger thing, and Marvel plays it fast and loose. You could look at the demon Mephisto and think that he's kind of the representation of like Satan in Marvel Comics, and he's inherently evil. Not really. He's just a hell lord. He just steals your soul when you make a deal with him and you die, and like that's it. That's really all it is. The idea of true, genuine, unadulterated evil, that's the Shadow King. This guy is malevolent. This guy wants to do nothing more than sow chaos and reap war. But notice as he shifts these faces, one of the things that Marvel toys with here is that Annihilation herself was just a facsimile of the Shadow King, right? A variant of the Shadow King, an essence of the Shadow King. In the same way that Null the Symbiote God and the Chaos King and those guys are all kind of part and parcel to the cosmic entity Oblivion. Now, Marvel's not saying this hard and fast, but they're kind of throwing it out there. And it's cool to see that that's the case, right? They're actually providing a basis to this character, that the Shadow King as a multiversal force of just evil out there in Marvel Comics permeates virtually every facet of every dimension and every realm and everywhere. There's never truly defeating this guy. That'll never happen. And so there's a kind of musing that goes on here, right? No hesitation at all. Be honest with me, Eric. She'd have made a great evil mutant wouldn't she, right? This, of course, is basically us switching over to Magneto, having a conversation with quote-unquote Xavier. Now, of course, Xavier is the Shadow King in this instance, and Magneto's well aware of what's going on as well, right? He even says, frankly, I doubt she'd have put up with me, and you can drop this facade that you've put on, Shadow King. I find it insulting. Charles deserves better than to speak your line. So right off the bat, both Storm and Magneto know exactly who this guy is, but as opposed to the years past where the Shadow King would just try to like possess them and take off into the real world, instead it's a place of testing. Right, and so it's really cool the way this happens, right? The Shadow King responds and says, oh, are you telling me with all you've learned, there is no shadow in Charles Xavier? Do you really believe that, Eric? The response of Magneto, he's a good man. And then Shadow King chimes in and he says, we must be aware of good men, mustn't we? Charles, most of all. Is that why you named your opposing force the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants? Now, here's another thing that the Shadow King is hitting on here. When he talks about we must watch out for somebody like Xavier, keep in mind that Xavier does have a darker side. And there was a point in Marvel Comics in the 1990s when the darker side of Xavier and the darker side of Magneto merged together, and they gave us Onslaught, this psychic entity of just pure malevolence with a desire to conquer everything, and he almost did. Right? Like, Onslaught was a hair's breadth from killing the Marvel Universe had it not been for really Franklin Richards and Arishem, right? Like, had that not happened, the entire Marvel Universe would have been dead. For those of you guys who don't know what that means, not a great big huge deal. Franklin Richards, this godly, powerful kid who resurrected all the dead superheroes in the Onslaught saga. But the important thing here is that Magneto says, I've explained that 100 times. The oppressor applies the label, the libel, to the oppressed. We are evil for existing, and thus all other evils they can imagine must apply. I was making a point. Now in turn, the Shadow King says, yes, you're always making points. It's always so much more subtle than simply wanting to create fear, isn't it, Eric? Now here's the cool thing that goes along with this. Eric, in a lot of ways, right, Magneto, Max, whatever you want to call him, in a lot of different capacities, he kind of plays the victim card pretty consistently. And I know a lot of Magneto fans won't really want to hear that, but like, hear me out for a second. Right? Magneto, in almost every single instance where he makes some campaign to launch an attack against the X-Men or the Avengers or the entirety of the Marvel Universe, whatever it is, I've seen you guys and I've seen what the world can be and I don't want to end up like that and that kind of thing. He carries a massive chip on his shoulder. Now, whether or not that is a righteous chip to carry or whether or not he's just throwing out the victim card because it's a way for him to justify his actions really changes from one story to the next, and it changes based on your perception of his character. But here, yet again, instead of standing up and saying, no, I chose that name because I wanted to instill fear in the hearts and minds of everybody out there that would ever challenge the mutant population, that would ever look at us and see that we're a group that can be easily pushed over, subdued, controlled, contained, that they were wrong for believing that, right? And we know he feels that way because there was a point in Jonathan Hickman's X-Men run when he gathers like all these world leaders together. And he's like, I know how much you humans love your symbolism, and I want you to know, I need you to know, you have new gods now. So we know that he wants to like instill fear in the hearts and minds of humanity, that messing with the mutant population is a fool's errand and effectively a suicide run. And the Shadow King calls him on it. Even when he refers to him as Eric, his response, stop calling me that, you're not Charles. Now the Shadow King says, you met him as Eric Lyncher, so that's how he thinks of you. But you're going by Max now, aren't you? Your attempt to finally drop all the masks. Only there's one mask left, isn't there? Tell the truth. However much you'd like to be Max again, what's your true name? What's the name in your heart? His response? Magneto, because that's who he really is. And that's the cool thing about all this, right? It really paints this picture, just that moment when he says, like, of all the names that I've ever had in my time in the Marvel Universe, when I was living in the concentration camps in World War II and I had a name, when I escaped during the liberation of the concentration camps, I met my wife Magda, we found an identity forger and I got a new name. When I went underground and when I was believed to have been dead and I had a name, of all the names that I've had in existence, Magneto is the one true name that I have, because that is really who I am. And that's when the old Magneto personality emerges here, and it just kind of challenges him. He comes face to face with himself. This old school personality says the human race no longer deserves dominion over the planet. The day of the mutants is upon us, and the first phase of my plan will be to show my power, to make Homo sapiens bow to Homo superior. Now at that point, you jump back over to Storm, right? And she kind of has this little bit of an inner monologue here, right? She says, Goddess, Omega, all these I have been called, and more. All these I have answered to, but I must back up such easy talk. And so when the Shadow King responds and says, look at you, Aurora, whose name means beauty, so powerful, so perfect, she muses to herself yet again. Kurt told me about this one, the first fallen, the primal opposite to the phoenix, according to the Watcher. For the phoenix is death and rebirth, and the fallen can only be stagnation. Is that who I am? Beautiful perfection, the Omega's Omega, the goddess on her throne, never failing, never permitted to fail. Am I to be allowed no flaw? No, I will not be cage demon, not by you or anybody else. Now, here's the thing. Here's one of the coolest things about Storm and Marvel Comics. Over the years in Storm's character, and this is what she's referencing here, right? The Omega's Omega, the goddess on her throne, that kind of thing. Storm has played a lot of very significant roles. In the early days of Marvel Comics, or at least her appearance in Marvel Comics, kind of going from giant-sized X-Men into future stories, and even referencing the backstories, Storm's most significant moments came in things like taking over leadership of the Morlocks. While this kind of allowed Callisto to basically operate as a proxy, right? Kind of the person that is her field commander of the Morlocks. She's the one that keeps an eye on the Morlocks when Storm's not there, and Storm just leaves to basically never come back, which in effect makes Callisto the leader of the Morlocks. The fact remained, the fate of the Morlocks rested on her shoulders. In Uncanny X-Men issue 201, when Cyclops leaves the team, her and Cyclops battle for leadership of the X-Men, and she overtakes that role. Now, the survival of the X-Men on any particular mission rests on her shoulders. Time and time again, this has been the case. When she found love with Black Panther again in her life for the second time after their childhood, the two of them get married, she becomes an emissary to Wakanda for the X-Men. She leads a double life. When the events of Avengers vs. X-Men pop off and her and Black Panther split and go their separate ways, it's yet another blow. The idea that Storm has to always be perfect. She has to always be at the top of her game. If she fails, everything fails. But notice this, right? The Shadow King asked the question, really? Not even yourself? Will you have any other choice? You wouldn't listen in your own reality, but now you're in my house. Now it's just you and me, and it's my turn to speak. I misread you last time we spoke. You couldn't listen then. Your responsibilities would not permit it, and you are addicted to responsibility, flitting from one to another like a butterfly, like a magician spinning plates. Can a Rocco be free if you're not there to free it? Can Earth have a voice in the galaxy if you're not there to voice it? Is evil ever fought if you're not the one fighting it? Can the world go on without Aurora Monroe? And what it does is it puts on this idea, right? It literally counters every point that she makes. You know, yeah, Storm, life is so hard. You have so much responsibility. You can never fail. And you know why? Because you make life hard, and because you give yourself so much responsibility, and you give yourself the statement that you can't fail. You've made your life hard, and now you want to complain about the difficulty of how hard life is, right? It's almost like that scene from The Devil's Advocate, right? Al Pacino, Keanu Reeves. Who are you carrying all those bricks for anyway, huh? God? Is that it? God, right? It's that whole kind of monologue here, right? It's just let it all go. Just walk away. And he even asked the question, how many times have you saved the world, Aurora? How often have the X-Men saved the universe? Only because you were there. You were the only reason the X-Men succeeded, the only reason they came out on top. Why? Had it not been for Aurora Monroe, like the X-Men never would have stood a chance. Of course not. That's just crazy talk, because you're so important, because you have so much responsibility and so much power. She immediately responds, right? Enough of this mockery, Shadow King. Every shape you borrow is an insult to me or to others. Take your own and be done. Or are you claiming to be every demon the X-Men have ever fought, right? She's literally sidestepping all the points that he's making. Well, I mean, you know, stop insulting me and mocking me, you know, like it's literally that, right? So what does he say? I cannot claim that. We are all ourselves here, even if we're also something else. But a light casts many shadows in many shapes, and shadow is shadow. Box the world into categories so simple, so controlled, and you're choosing a neat lie over a messy truth, because the reality is the world cannot be contained. There are as many perspectives of the world as there are people in it, and it's impossible to take all these different concepts of reality, confine them down into these very neat and organized boxes because it makes you feel safe. The truth is the world's chaotic and messy and oftentimes problematic. Life's hard. Wear a helmet. And so he says, and that path leads to my territory, Aurora. Remember how I tricked you? Forge does, and look at your buddy, what's his name? Max. Now there's a man who sees life in categories, because the reality here is that in a lot of ways, they both do. Right? Aurora's prison is a prison that she's fashioned out of taking all this responsibility on her shoulder, of really buying into her own hype with all the power that she has. And it's not to marginalize her power. Storm's one of the most powerful mutants in Marvel Comics. I mean, Marvel's established that, right? Like the Omega level mutant of all the Omega level mutants. No doubt it was done because, you know, X-Men 97, but the fact remains, that's true. She's ridiculously overpowered, but it doesn't change the fact that her life is hard because she makes it hard, because she wants it to be hard, because for whatever reason, that's how she defines what it means to be an X-Man in the world. Magneto is the same way. His prison is his past. His prison is his experience, his torments, the things he's been through, the inability to walk away from it all. That's his cage. And as he's talking to himself, he says, I see you. And that's when his past self says, remember, we are Homo superior. We are born to rule the earth. The humans must be our slaves. They are our natural enemies. And together, with our superhuman powers, we can conquer them all. Now, the kicker is that that's how Magneto used to think. And if it strikes you as being kind of comedic and being old school and being nonsensical, that's a testament to how much Magneto's character has changed and how he's been written to change over the years in Marvel Comics. He's nothing like the old school Magneto. Nothing like the guy from way back in the day. There's a little more pomp and circumstance, a little more maturity, right? A little more brazenness than there used to be, but he is certainly not the same guy. And that's why he says, enough. No need to shame me further with my own ill-considered words. And that's when this voice responds, which is in effect the Shadow King. You dare say that in my presence? Have you forgotten that our personal feelings are nothing? It is the plan that is all important. And he says, ah, yes, the plan. My great scheme to give humanity a single target to focus on. His old self's response, the Shadow King's response, of course, humans are like sheep. They respond to certain stimuli, and fear is one of the most potent. Now, this is where things get cool, because Magneto, in listening to all of this, says, yes, I remember telling myself exactly that Charles Carrots would not tempt the humans to justice without an opposing stick. Magneto would be the iron rod to beat sense into the humans, and if it became necessary, into Charles and his students. How quickly it became unnecessary. Charles once told me that humans and mutants could create a golden age on Earth if we could only work side by side. I forget my exact response to that particular utopian notion, but I suspect that you remember. That's when his older self responds, never, right? It's just like, the humans must be our slaves. They are not worthy to share dominion of Earth with us. You have made your choice forevermore. We are mortal foes. And that's where Magneto says, yes, I made a choice. I chose to reject Charles and later to reject you. But to live is to learn. And perhaps having learned to choose again, I see you, Magneto, and there is still a place for us in the broken land. I do not deny you. I will not ignore you. You are a part of me, perhaps the most foundational part. You are my rage, my justified anger in response to the monstrous crimes against me and mine. Should I forgive those evils? Should I forget? Remember only my daughter's laugh, never her screams? So I am told. So I am often told. But if I cannot forgive, not even myself, where does that leave us? Now, this is a really, really cool statement here, right? Because what it says is it's really Magneto coming to the realization, if this old school version is his yin, then he is his own yang, two sides of the same coin. This version of Magneto that you see before you now is a lot more mature. He's older, wiser, he's lived. He's realized the world is not as simple as he would like it to be. No matter how hard he fights and screams and beats his hands against the wall, the world will not change for him. One, because he's not important enough, and he never was. And two, because the complexity of the world and the people therein is what makes the world so fascinating in the first place. If everybody believed the same thing and walked the same way and talked the same way and had the same viewpoints, the world would be really, really, really boring. It would really, really suck. And so that's why he says, you are me and I am you. I cannot forget you, nor should I. That yes, I will remember the cries of my daughter Anya as she burned alive in a house that was set on fire by villagers who feared what I was. And I will not forget how swiftly I killed them with the vengeance of literally a pissed off God. But I also will not forget her laughter. I will not forget how she made me feel when I saw a smile on her face or when she called me her father. These two things must coexist. And he says, throughout my life, I have repressed the rage in me until it exploded, or I have given it free rein over all decision, but I cannot return to the world and return to the same path. I must change. I must evolve. So I acknowledge all that I have done. I admit all that I am. I own the shadow that is in me. And if this is the engine that drives me, let it drive me to a better world. A world for all who are hated and feared. The response of this Magneto personality, effectively the Shadow King, we'll see. And so what you do is you switch back to Storm. You guys see what I'm talking about how dope this comic is. So you switch back to Storm, right? And she's like, so now what? Do we come to an agreement? The response of the Shadow King, I've said my piece. You could accept me, acknowledge that I am simply part of the human heart, go your own way, and allow me to work in the world. Or you could do what the cosmos allowed you to do on this journey to defend it by rejecting me and doing battle. Forces are in motion, Aurora. It is a very good time to take me out of the picture. Shift the balance in favor of my opposite number. Do you stick or do you twist? Now her response, right, in thinking about this, like she knows the Shadow King well enough to know as a malevolent force that's always manipulating and always tricking and always twisting in order to get his way. She says he presents the decision as a binary, two categories, but that of course is one of his traps. I must accept him, acknowledge his part in the tapestry of existence, respect that he is as he is according to his role, so I can fight him with every drop of my blood, for the shadows in us must be seen in order to be truly beaten, and evil is never fought if someone is not fighting it. Now, here's the cool thing, right? This is very like Trial of Reed Richards like. And for those of you guys who don't know what I mean, in Marvel Comics, there was an iconic story, landmark story, one of the most important Galactus stories in the history of Marvel Comics. It was called The Trial of Reed. Reed Richards had saved the life of Galactus and was put on trial by the empires of the universe. The argument being that by ensuring that Galactus survives, because he will travel from world to world and consume the life-sustaining energies killing billions, that Reed has basically doomed untold trillions to existence. The response was that the cosmic entities appeared, specifically Eternity, if my memory serves me correctly, and he tells everybody there, Galactus has to exist. He's a fundamental force of existence. If he doesn't exist, the universe will literally break down. That's his role, as it's my role as Eternity to encapsulate all of creation. Reed did exactly what he was supposed to do. I find him not guilty, and my decision is beyond contestation. So, deuces, like that's basically what it was. It was pretty cool, you know, the way that it was done. But at the end of the day, the Shadow King kind of taunts Storm, right? When she comes to this realization that shadows are an inherent part of us. We all experience evil. We all experience malevolence. We all experience hate and anger and all these things, right? But we are at all times a yin and yang. And the goal is to maintain a kind of balance. For every instance for us being pissed off, we have hopefully an instance of us being happy. So we're not just walking around like people who are perpetually angry, spewing anger and vitriol all over the world, right? That's reserved for the people on Twitter. So what the Shadow King says is, that's the spirit, Aurora. Who else has the power, the will to take me on? Who can free your people? Who will save the world? You, Aurora Monroe, the goddess who never fails. You alone. And that's when Storm comes to the realization of what's going on, that she's not alone, right? And she even says that. She says, and suddenly I see the last trap, a subtle one, and expertly baited, me alone as I came here, as if I had no other choice, as if it was somehow dishonorable to do otherwise, as if teamwork, solidarity, friendship, love, these were somehow weaknesses. Perhaps they are to a demon, but I am an X-Man, Shadow King. We are never alone. And that's when she realizes her and Magneto have literally just been standing side by side the entire time. But each one has been going through this trial in their own minds in dealing with the Shadow King. But by unifying their forces together, right, unifying their power together, they literally overcome him, right? Storm says, in a heartbeat, Max is at my side, joining my fight. How could it be otherwise? Instinctively, he knows what must be done. But then, we've done it before on Arakko, i.e. Mars. Pooled our powers, fed my life force to him in a single attack, a perfect mutant circuit. Even in this place beyond death, we can give our lives against the great enemy of life, the Shadow King. Fearful and furious at the failure of his trick, tries to break the link, but the energies have built too far now, and they are only building further, back and forth, taking more of me with every pass. And when the storm breaks, comes the moment of release, and the Shadow King screams. This guy is defeated. Now, he's not killed, and he can never truly be killed. He can only ever really be defeated in any particular situation, basically kept at bay. He effectively just left, and that's really it. And so Storm tells Magneto to turn the key again, right? Remember, the key that he was given on some previous mission, he had no idea what it meant, but when he died, he had the key with him, and the key was basically unlocking the door for him to go through his kind of purgatory journey and then hopefully find some way back to the land of the living. And that's why she says, turn your key again, return to the world, fight for it. And he says, no. Not at this cost, not at the cost of one more innocent life, human or mutant, not one more, not while I have the power to say no. And where Storm says, don't be absurd, it's out of our control. The response of Magneto, nothing is out of our hands. And she says, his anger overflows like the Magneto who was, channeled with molten iron into new paths, into the Magneto who will be. And he says, if I can draw on your life, Aurora, you can draw on mine. I give it freely. I have the power. I am the power. Take it and call it forth. And so this literally snaps Storm back to reality, right? She basically comes back to life where she's there with Adam Brashear and Galactus's mom. I know that last statement sounds crazy. Yes, Galactus has a mom. She hangs out with Adam Brashear, the Blue Marvel. I can explain how that goes down. If you guys are interested, let me know down in the comments section. But basically, Storm wakes up here, right? And it's kind of like, okay, right? Adam Brashear is like, I'm glad you're back with us. You gave us quite a scare. What were you thinking? And she literally says that you don't cheat death by playing it safe. We did it, Adam. Look. And through this portal, Magneto enters back into the real world, and he says, "Who am I? I am power." And he says, "Men call me Magneto." Literally, this guy is reborn. Here's the question that you have to ask. With this new level of resolve, does Magneto now have a new level of power? But with that being said, guys, we're going to bring this to an end. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. If you guys need to get caught up, make sure you click this link to the playlist, and I will catch you all later. Peace.